fully delight in thee.
Hello, fellow brethren, and welcome to another installment of Motivating Monday. For the next 4 weeks, the Motivating Monday sessions that I will be sharing with you will be centered on the topics of humility, mercy, grace, and service. For this week's session, I'd like to give you a quick overview of these 4 qualities before diving into greater detail in the subsequent weeks. Firstly, how can we define each of these 4 qualities? For humility, let us look at 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5. This reads, "Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble." The word humility here translates into modesty, humbleness, and lowliness. In the case for mercy, let's turn to Luke chapter 6, verse 36. This reads, "Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful." The Greek word for the word merciful here translates into full of mercy and compassionateness. Next, for grace, let's look at James chapter 4, verse 6. "But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble." The Greek word for the word grace translates also into favor, acceptability, and is often defined as unmerited favor. And lastly, for service, let us look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 6. "Not with eye service as man pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart." Verse 7 reads, "With good will doing service, as to the Lord and not to men." The Greek word for the word service here actually means bondage, be it voluntarily or involuntarily. So now that we understand what is the Bible definition of these 4 qualities, let's look at what the world thinks about these 4 qualities. For each of these qualities, I would like to share with you a couple of quotes as to how some in the world would view these qualities. Firstly, in terms of humility, I'm very sure that many of us have heard of the phrase, "If you got it, flaunt it." People in the world can be very self-centered and very egotistical. Their attention may be focused on putting themselves in the best possible light, using it to showcase their success to others. On the other hand, humility is not viewed positively in this aspect. In the case of social media, modesty and humbleness are not qualities that you would tend to expect to find. In fact, there are instances where one's supposed humbleness is used to show off instead. This is where the term humble brag or humble bragging comes from. Next, for mercy. Many of us would be familiar with the phrase, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." Many in the world tend to advocate for standing up for your rights. This means that if someone has wronged you, then it is well within your right to have your revenge against that particular person. On top of that, revenge is best served at a later date when it deals the maximum impact and damage, adding salt to the wound. That's when the term "best served cold" comes in. Rarely will you find someone calling for or even having compassion after being wronged, especially in the context of the secular world. And lastly, for grace, there's a phrase that is often said, "Each man for himself." This is a common phrase which I thought about when I was considering the world's response to grace, which is "each man for himself." The phrase is actually the total opposite of grace, which is unmerited favor that we do to others. On the other hand, the world is self-serving and is only interested in advancing the interests of oneself. In terms of service, another common phrase that is often being used is that the customer is always right. In society, oftentimes jobs in the hospitality and also in the food and beverage industry are often shunned. One of the reasons cited as to why these jobs are often shunned is because many of these roles are customer facing, and often in the course of performing out these roles, some of the service staff may encounter very demanding customers. But due to the nature of their job, they have to comply and accede to every customer's request, however much unreasonable or unbearable. As seen earlier, the world does not exactly view these four qualities in a very positive light, and usually even has a contrary view as to the views expressed in the Bible. Given what the world views these four qualities, why then do we have to learn about these four qualities? I would say that firstly, it is due to the exhortation that we have in the Bible. Christians are exhorted to deny ourselves, to take out our cross, and to follow after Christ. These four qualities are part of our process of self-denial. In the case of humility, this is a denial of our ego. In the case of mercy, this is a denial of our rights, in giving our rights to right a wrong done against ourselves. In the example of grace, it's a denial of our self-serving nature. And lastly, in the example of service, it's a denial of feeling superior to others and being lowly to serve others. Next, the reason why we have to learn about these four qualities is also because of the example that Jesus has given to us. Jesus was the embodiment of these qualities. Let's look at how these four qualities are prevalent in the passage of Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 to 8, a passage which I'm very sure many of us are familiar with. Let's read each of these verses. Verse 3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. This is how we can see the quality of humility of Jesus. Philippians chapter 2, verse 4. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. This is a clear example of grace in giving favor to others. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Verse 6, who, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Again, another case of humility, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. In this passage, we can see the example of Jesus in his service and in his taking on the form of a servant throughout his entire ministry on earth. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 8, we can see that given that Jesus was found in fashion as a man, and also as we cross-reference in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, we can see that Jesus was able to extend his compassion towards us in being able to empathize with us, such that we have a high priest who is able to empathize with all our infirmities. So, from the exhortation to live out these qualities, as well as the example of Jesus, as we have just read in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 to 8, we can see that Christians ought to have each and every one of these four qualities. In the next 4 motivating Mondays, I will be going into deeper detail as to what each of these 4 qualities mean. Look forward to speaking to you again next week. Take care.